Hailie Deegan was spotted at Iowa Speedway and could be making some starts at Indy NXT for Andretti Autosport, and there's a lot of silly season moves that are expected to happen really soon. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to talk about Pocono Raceway, as it was announced last night that the Pocono Cup race officially sold out. That includes the grandstands, the camping, the infield, among other things. Really big deal for Pocono. Obviously, one of the biggest draws of Pocono recent years is the racing has been pretty solid, but also them going down to one race has really helped the attendance over the course of the last 2 years since they went back to one race in 2022. I think it's one of the best decisions Pocono's made in recent years. Really awesome to see Pocono be able to sell out the Cup Series race, so we're going to talk about the traffic issues here in just a little bit. It's pretty exciting to see that the Pocono Cup race officially sold out. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christian Eckes and Corey Heim. As it was reported by Trey Ryan that Christian Eckes and Corey Heim have led over 50% of the laps in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2024. This is the first time it's happened through almost half the season since 1996 when I believe Ron Hornaday Jr. and Jack Sprague led a majority of the laps. Corey Heim and Christian Eckes are both running to move up the Cup next year, and they both continue to be extremely impressive this season. They've been extremely dominant. They've won a majority of races. Corey Heim's won 5 races, and Christian Eckes has won 3 races this season. It's very likely one of them is going to win the championship in 2024, and there's a really good chance of both, or at least one of them, could be moving up to the Cup Series in a really solid ride in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Pocono Raceway, as we're going to talk about the traffic issues. Before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place, there was a lot of inclement weather hitting the racetrack, and because there was lightning and thunderstorms among other things hitting the track early, they had to stop the flow of traffic getting in. Unfortunately, the traffic did not get any better, and a lot of people had a very difficult time getting into the racetrack. From what reports have suggested, there are people running out of their cars and running through the fields to try to get to the racetrack. This is almost as bad as what happened in Kentucky in 2011. Now, Pocono Raceway did come out during the Cup Series race, I believe at the middle portion of Stage 2, and they apologized for what had happened, and they are planning to basically, I believe, refund a lot of people and make it right. First of all, I got to give Pocono a lot of props. I don't remember if Kentucky ever did this thing, but I really hope they can make it right in this situation, which is a shame because I talk about Pocono selling out, but this is a very bad look for Pocono. I hope they can do the right thing, make the right decisions, and go ahead and refund a lot of people that weren't able to get in. Hopefully this can be figured out and resolved because stuff like this should not be happening. Hopefully this can be resolved because things like this should not be happening, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday late or Saturday morning that rent is due Monday for vendors in Chicago. But some vendors are still without buyout checks from NASCAR as their rent is due later today. Now, according to what the report suggested, it's not a massive amount of people that are still waiting for the money. It sounds like it's about 3 to 5 people, vendors in the area that are still waiting for those buyout checks to come from NASCAR. Obviously, it was a very successful weekend at times, so the Cup Series race was a little bit of a disaster. I thought the weekend itself was very successful. I really hope for these people's sake that they're able to get the buyout checks they deserve and they can get the money. It sounds like it's a rent issue on other parts. I really hope this can get resolved for a lot of people, though, from the area of Chicago, because I want Chicago to come back next year. If they can't get it resolved, there could be some legal action coming place in the future. So I really hope this is resolved. Do I think it will be? I do think there's a good chance of possibly that this situation will end up being resolved in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Iowa IndyCar doubleheader. As before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place, you had the Iowa doubleheader for IndyCar. On race number 1, Scott McLaughlin and Colton Herta completely dominated the race. And you saw some couple big wrecks happening. You had Will Power running the back of multiple other drivers, including Pietro Fittipaldi, and Ed Carpenter got collected. We had the championship leader, Alex Palou, end up crashing and wrecking out, and Colton Herta trapped on pits. Outside of that, the race in day number 1 was not very exciting. Scott McLaughlin got a great restart and was able to pull away and pick up his first ever oval victory in day number 1. Not the most exciting and thrilling racing because of the repave that took place. Then we get to day number 2. And it started off with Scott McLaughlin letting right where he let off. And he dominated the early portion of this race. Everything changed on lap 100 when Augustine Canapino, coming off pit road, made a major mistake and ended up spinning coming off of pit road. This handed the lead to Will Power and Alex Poe, and Scott McLaughlin restart third because Scott McLaughlin was trapped a lap down. Alex Poe was dropped back to second, and I think at the time, and he actually was able to get the race lead. He was able to stay on the lead lap with Will Power staying in second position. And then Alex Poe dominated, but then we had pit stops, and Will Power had a very fantastic second pit stop, and he would come off the corner, continue domination. There was a caution with about 100 laps to go for a spin, and then they got back going, and basically Will Power pulled out the pretty big lead, had a great pit stop, and was able to come off the corner and win at Iowa Speedway. While that was going on, there was a big wreck to happen. Airborne, Stingray Robb unfortunately ended up crashing and wrecking, and there were a few other drivers that were involved, including Ed Carpenter, Alexander Rossi, and I think Kyle Kirkwood was collected as well. Everyone's okay. HFO Racing did release a press that Stingray Robb has been released from the hospital, so that's really good news to hear. The racing itself this weekend was not very good. There's a big wreck that took place. I'm glad everyone's okay because that's a serious wreck. There's nothing to joke about there. Really sucky situation. I feel bad for everyone involved. I thought the racing this weekend in IndyCar was not very good, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Legacy Motor Club. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass earlier tonight, that Legacy Motor Club has made more executive changes. So Bobby Kennedy, who's been a veteran of NASCAR for many, many years, is officially back in NASCAR and is now the general manager of Legacy Motor Club. Joey Cohan, who's been the GM of Legacy Motor Club for the last few years, has now been let go and is no longer part of Legacy Motor Club. Bobby Kennedy is a former crew chief for drivers like Michael Waltrip and Jim Sauter and Darrell Waltrip, Kyle Petty, and David Rudiman as well. Hopefully Bobby Kennedy can go in there and straighten things out. Legacy shows some decent pace and speed this week, so maybe that pace and speed with Bobby Kennedy coming in there is maybe starting to show up for Eric Jones. Hopefully this executive change can come into play and really fix issues over Legacy Motor Club, because I think Legacy still has a lot of problems they absolutely do need to resolve, but at least I think their performance today at least showed some improvement, and I do think that Legacy Motor Club had a great run at least today with Eric Jones. They've been struggling a lot this year, so hoping with these executive changes coming over Legacy Motor Club, it can lead to Legacy showing a lot more pace and speed going forward into the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. As Kyle Larson was interviewed by the media, including people from Front Stretch yesterday, and he says he's very excited to be returning to the Brickyard in 2024. Kyle Larson has the opportunity to win the Brickyard 400 this year, his first ever Brickyard 400, but I agree 100%. I'm with Kyle Larson too, and a lot of drivers, not just Kyle Larson, are super excited to return to the Brickyard Oval. Look, I think we all can agree that there was good racing at the Indy Road Course, but I think it outstayed its welcome, and with it being a 30-year anniversary of the Brickyard 400, it makes a lot of sense for the Brickyard 400 to make an official comeback. I'm not sure how the racing is going to be. We've seen races on flat ovals and flat tracks not be the most exciting, so I'm really hoping that maybe the next-gen car can be really, really good this time around. I look for drivers like Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, Tyler Reddick, and Chase Elliott to probably be the favorites going into the weekend, because usually, historically, the teams that are really, really fast throughout the year, they end up being the favorites to go out there and win at these tracks. I'm excited for the Brickyard. It's the first time in a while. I know the racing may not be the most exciting, but like I said, I'm super excited about it, and I'm looking forward to see the racing this weekend, because I think we might see at least some decent racing this weekend at Indianapolis, not just in the Xfinity Series, but hopefully in the Cup Series race as well. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Catherine Lake. Now, Catherine Lake, I believe, is being interviewed by Lee Diffie before the IndyCar race took place, and she basically kind of reported that she is maybe looking to do some NASCAR races this year in the not-so-distant future. Now, Catherine Lake does have a little bit of experience in NASCAR. She actually made a couple starts with JD Motorsports, I think, back in 2021 and also in 2022 as well. We might also see her do some more races with the Elf sponsorship as well. Now, it's unclear what team she might end up driving for. Maybe it's going to come in a track like Watkins Glen. Maybe JD Motorsports looking for someone's sponsorship, because that team's been having some sponsor troubles over the last couple of years. And I think with her having Elf sponsorship, I think that's a team that she could go with maybe AM Racing. We know that Hailie Deegan is no longer AM Racing. Maybe they bring her in for a track like that. That wouldn't shock me or surprise me, to be honest. But it's really cool that Catherine Lake is looking to come over to NASCAR, looking to race once again. I think she'll do a very solid and good job if she does get the chance and opportunity to race in NASCAR in the future once again. I want to see it happen, right? I think it'd be really good for the sport. We've been seeing more IndyCar drivers or other drivers of form. We've seen Scott McLaughlin and Joseph Newgarden showed interest in recent years. I really hope we do truly get to see a chance where Catherine Lake can race in NASCAR, because I certainly think she would do a decent job. It depends on the team she's driving for, but I do think that Catherine Lake deserves a chance and opportunity to try out and race in NASCAR. Once again, I really hope it does end up happening. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Leigh Diffey. Now, Leigh Diffey called his final IndyCar races this weekend at Iowa Speedway. He will not be calling the IndyCar race this weekend at Toronto, as of course he'll be headed over to Paris to cover the Olympics for 2024. Now, why is this his last IndyCar broadcast today? Well, the reason why is because he is going to be going over and starting to cover NASCAR races for the remainder of the season, right when we get to the Olympic break. Next week is going to be also the Final Cup broadcast that Rick Allen is going to be doing in 2024. Remember, Rick Allen is going to be covering NASCAR Xfinity Series broadcast through the rest of the year, and it will actually go to the CW with Jeff Burton and Steve Letarte, as well as a lot of people from the NBC are going to be working on that production until the start of next season. As for Leigh Diffey covering NASCAR races, I think it's going to be super fun to have him do some coverage. He did a few races back in 2015 in Xfinity, did some NASCAR Cup races in 2017 when Rick Allen was covering track and field, and Leigh Diffey did an excellent job substituting for Rick Allen. And back then, I was really hoping Leigh Diffey would get to cover some more NASCAR races, and I'm glad to see that it looks like it's going to be happening. I think Leigh's an amazing commentator. He always does an amazing job and puts on an amazing show as a lead broadcaster. So I'm super excited about this. I'm looking forward to this for Leigh Diffey. I think he's going to do an excellent job. I'm so excited that Leigh gets to finally call some races, because I think he's going to do a very excellent and a really solid and great job covering some NASCAR races later this season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the All-Star race. As Matt Weaver, who works at Sportsline and other media companies, put out a very interesting article in regards to the All-Star race. And he calls for NASCAR to rotate the All-Star race. He talks about tracks like South Boston, Stafford, Berlin, and also Five Flags Speedway as well. What he's kind of insinuating is that he wants to see a grassroots feel of the All-Star race. I 100% agree with Matt Weaver. Don't get me wrong, I have liked the fact that the All-Star race has been in North Wilkesboro over the course of the last few years. But I've been saying this for a long time. I think North Wilkesboro's done what they've done the last few years. They honestly should be hosting a points-paying NASCAR Cup Series race. It does frustrate me that a track like North Wilkesboro that was on the schedule for a long time made a comeback. There was talk it was going to be a points-paying race this year. Obviously, that did not end up happening, and we already know at this point that it will be hosting the All-Star race once again in 2025, and I'm not really excited about that, right? Don't get me wrong, I really love North Wilkesboro, and I truly do want to see it be on the schedule next year. But at the same time, I want to see a rotation of the All-Star race. I want to see them go to South Boston. I want to see them go to a short track. And honestly, Bowman Gray, instead of being the Clash, because we know it's going to be the Clash next year more than likely, I really wish that Bowman Gray Stadium was not hosting the Clash and was hosting the All-Star race and have a track like Daytona or like a track outside of the U.S. maybe host a race. But then again, it'd be very tough to have a race like that because it's in the colder temperatures and it's going to be super cold at Bowman Gray Stadium when we do end up going there. Nonetheless, it's disappointing for sure that we can't rotate at this point. I would love to see South Boston, Stafford, or Berlin hosted in the future, but of course you do have to figure out how close it is when the All-Star race happens, and you also have to move around the date. But certainly I don't think NASCAR would have a major issue with that. I certainly think they'd be able to move around the date, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rockingham Speedway. As it was reported by Peter Strada of TSJ Sports, who he currently owns, that he was actually spotted at Rockingham Speedway, and they had an open house yesterday. Yesterday, on July 13th, was officially the open house day. There's obviously been a lot of talk about potentially Rockingham hosting a NASCAR day in the future. And we know the Rockingham Speedway and the people from the Rockingham area who basically used to own our complex, I believe, they're very interested in hosting another NASCAR Cup Series race in the future. The last time the NASCAR Cup Series race at Rockingham Speedway was all the way back in 2004 when you had that incredible photo finish between Matt Kenseth and Casey Kane, and you also had Jamie McMurray in position to get the win as well. The last NASCAR race that took place at this track was all the way back in 2013 when Kyle Larson won his first career Craftsman Truck Series race in that 32 or the 30 Turner Scott car. I think that it'd be really awesome for Rockingham to come back. And personally, I mentioned it's about the All-Star race stuff, but I think Rockingham Speedway would be an amazing and excellent track to host the All-Star race in the future. I've been kind of pushing for that to be the All-Star race or get a points-paying race in the future. I think the racing would be really, really good, especially with the surface, how quick it ages and how tires get eaten super, super quickly. I think Rockingham Speedway would be really, really a fun track to put on a really exciting and great show. So I really hope it ends up happening in the future. Rockingham Speedway can eventually host a day because I think Rockingham, like I said, would be able to host a very solid and a really strong product. So like I said, I really hope it ends up happening. I truly hope we do get to see in the not so distant future Rockingham Speedway host a NASCAR Cup Series race or host a NASCAR race in general, because I do believe that the racing would be pretty solid and pretty good overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. Now, I believe it was on Thursday, Michael McDowell was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, and he basically kind of talked about the fact that who is his crew chief going to be for 2025. He pretty much confirmed that more than likely Travis Peterson, as reports have suggested, that Travis Peterson more than likely is going to be joining Michael McDowell at Spire Motorsports in 2025. We know that Noah Gragson, of course, is going to Front Row Motorsports, but Bob Jenkins had kind of initiated that rumor and rumbling that we were going to be seeing Noah Gragson have a new crew chief, potentially Drew Blickensderfer. But something Michael McDowell mentioned is that there's a lot of major moves that are about to happen at at Spire Motorsports in the future. We already know that Rodney Childers, of course, is going to be leaving SHR and leaving the Ford camp and is going to be going over to Chevrolet to work at Spire Motorsports. What other moves could end up happening? Could we potentially see Andretti come in and work with a team like Spire? There's been rumors and rumblings that Andretti has been looking to get into NASCAR. Gamebridge, of course, which is owned by Dan Towner, so of course a co-owner of the Andretti Global organization. I could certainly see that being a possibility, and are other people from Stewart-Haas Racing coming in. Apparently, Rodney Childers is looking to bring a lot of people from the 14 and bring him over to the 17 next year, because we know that Rodney Childers is crew chief for Corey LaJoie. There's been a lot of big moves happening. Kyle Busch Motorsports, of course, got him sold by Spire, and you have drivers like Roger Kroof, who could be moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in the future. Could we see Spire Motorsports open up an Xfinity team? Could Connor Zilic go there? That could certainly be a possibility and a shout. Could we see a surprise driver like a Matt Benedetto go there? That could be certainly a possibility and a shout as well. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens nonetheless and see how things play out. But I do think a lot of major moves are about to take place, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how things kind of play out going forward in the future for Spire. But it looks like Spire Motorsports is about to make some pretty major executive moves going into the not-so-distant future, and we'll see what announcements they end up making. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chase Elliott and Daniel Suarez. Now we're going to talk about Daniel Suarez and his contract talks here in just a little bit. But both Chase Elliott and Daniel Suarez spoke about what happened at Chicago at the end of the race. So coming to the checker flag at the end of the NASCAR Cup Series race at the Chicago Street Course, Chase Elliott had contact with Daniel Suarez. When Chase Elliott got it back at Daniel Suarez, as Suarez was looking to pass Brad Keselowski and get around him, but Suarez was not trying to be over-aggressive on Brad Keselowski. And then Chase Elliott got in the back of Suarez, and Chase Elliott ended up spinning out really into the back of the wall. Once the race concluded, on the cooldown lap, there was contact between both Chase Elliott and Daniel Suarez going down the long straightaway, I believe in turn number 5. And then after the race, there was a post-race discussion. Now, obviously, a lot of people are wondering this week if Chase Elliott was going to receive a penalty because of the contact. Well, Chase Elliott blames himself for what had happened at Chicago and took a lot of responsibility. But he also said that Bubba Wallace should not have received a fine. He felt like the penalty was way too harsh for Bubba Wallace. Daniel Suarez said he never really even felt the contact to begin with from Chase Elliott. And basically, he also kind of said that $50,000 is extremely excessive in my opinion. First of all, I think that if you're going to penalize one driver like Bubba Wallace, you should have penalized Chase Elliott here. But I also say the same thing too. I am also glad that NASCAR did not penalize Chase Elliott or him in that situation. I also don't think Bubba Wallace should have been penalized. I think that they're going to be good going forward. I don't think any more issues are going to rise for both Chase Elliott and Daniel Suarez. I think they both race generally respectfully at times, and they've had good respect racing against each other over the course of the last couple of years. Chase Elliott, of course, leading the point standings after a solid run today at Pocono, and we'll talk about Corey LaJoyne in a little bit, but Daniel Suarez is sitting 17th in the standings, not too far behind the driver in 16 points, which, of course, is Chase Briscoe. I don't think we're going to see more issues between both these guys. They both generally race each other very respectfully and very cleanly, and like I said, I don't think we'll see more issues going forward. I could be wrong if things end up spiraling out of control and things end up happening, but I don't think anything else is going to happen going forward, in my honest opinion, between Chase Elliott and Daniel Suarez. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cole Custer. Now, Cole Custer, of course, won the NASCAR Xfinity Series race yesterday, picking up his first win of 2024. And Claire B. Lane, who I think may still work at Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, I'm not entirely sure, but Claire B. Lane spoke to Joe Custer yesterday. And he says that the win that Cole Custer received helps him potentially make a move up to the Cup Series in 2025. And then we saw Joe Custer kind of joke at one of the picker members from the Double Zero team about will Cole Custer have a ride in 2025, and then Cole Custer's picker members like, I don't know, maybe we'll have to wait and see. Cole Custer's been a lot of talk, conversation with how well he's been running so far this year that he could potentially move back up to the Cup Series in 2025. Remember, Cole Custer was in the Cup Series for 3 years, from 2020 to 2022, and he did end up winning a race at Kentucky, but that, of course, was a final restart, and as one of the best moments in next-gen car, not next-gen, the 550 horsepower package really ended up happening. But the rest of that time, Cole Custer completely struggled and got demoted to Xfinity. He won the championship last year and has a chance to win back-to-back championships in 2024. I think that Cole Custer has done enough, in my opinion, to make the move back up to the NASCAR Cup Series. I think he's done a very excellent job this year with SHR. He's been super consistent. Now, the big question is, where does Cole Custer go in 2025? Could he go to Front Row Motorsports and drive that third seat for Front Row? That is a possibility. We know that Noah Gragson is going to be one of the rides and Todd Gilliland's going to be another ride. But I don't think with him having already a lot of Cup experience, having 3 years of that and some select starts this year and the previous years as well, I don't think he ends up going there. Could he go to another team in the Ford camp like a third RFK car? That could be a possibility. But the most likely option for Cole Custer going into 2025 is going to be the Haas factory team. He has been heavily linked to this Haas factory team. And remember, Joe Custer is basically going to be running this operation in 2025, which is why it's expected that he's likely going to get this seat. Many are going to ask, has he earned the right and an opportunity to get the seat? I absolutely think he has. He's done a very solid job this year. And I think if you've done good enough, you deserve a second chance. And Cole Custer is still relatively young. I think Cole Custer will turn 26 very, very soon, and I think he's earned a chance and opportunity to move up and make some Cup starts once again and move up full time. Again, I don't know how many more Cup starts he has scheduled for this year. I think he may have some starts scheduled for Rick Ware. I'm not entirely sure. But I think Cole Custer's done a very, very solid job, and I do think 100% he deserves a ride and opportunity to make the move back up the Cup in 2025. So will it happen? We're going to have to kind of wait and see how things play out, but I do think there's a really strong chance and a very great opportunity that you will end up seeing Cole Custer move up to the NASCAR Cup Series and drive for the Haas factory team in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sam Mayer, Shane Van Gisbergen, and Chandler Smith all in one story. So if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race yesterday, you saw the contact that took place with about 10 laps to go in this race. Shane Van Gisbergen was moving through the field, was having a very solid performance, and was actually inside the top 10 on pure pace and speed. He did have some fresh tires, but he was moving up and doing a very excellent job. All of a sudden, Sam Mayer gets this really insane run and tries to make a move to the inside on Shane and just completely dumps Shane going into the tunnel turn. and then Shane, of course, falls all the way back to 30th. He gets a really great restart later, and then he basically gets turned again. I can't remember who turned him. I hear people said and reports suggest maybe Ryan Sieg, but Ryan Sieg got a good performance, so I'm not entirely sure if Ryan Sieg's the one who got in him on the last restart. Sam Mayer did apologize apparently on the radio. He did feel bad about the incident and wreck, but Shane Van Gisbergen also said that he says that he's pretty sure that Sam Mayer did not mean to run into him, but he also says that he should know a little bit better, and he also, I think, calls someone, I can't remember the word, like wobbler, that basically turned him from 83rd position, which I thought was really, really funny. And then you had another incident where you saw Chandler Smith go up and confront Sam Mayer after the race, and Sam Mayer kind of had a little more of a snark response for Chandler Smith, basically saying he just doesn't like to be raced really, really hard. And he once again did apologize to the media for how he ended up turning SVG. Felt bad for what happened there. Chandler Smith also called him out as well after the race had concluded. I think Jordan Bianchi spoke to both Sam Mayer and Chandler Smith about the incident and spoke about the wreck there. Look, I've said this a lot about Sam Mayer. I think Sam Mayer is an extremely talented race car driver, and there's already conversations about him potentially moving up next year. But stuff like this is not going to help his case. He's got a lot of talent, and I think he's refined the mistakes he's made over the last few years. But taking out a driver who, in my opinion, there's no reason to do that. That was very unnecessary from Sam Mayer. He should have known better about the incident. He should have known to be a little more patient. I get you want to make a move. It's understandable. I get it. I understand. But completely uncalled for. For a driver, like I said, that's looking to move up the Cup and take one of the front row seats next year, you've got to know a lot better about the situational awareness. Because people in the Cup Series are going to be watching that. And they're going to see that. And they're not going to respect you. The one thing, like I said, I'll give Sam Mayer some credit for is the fact that he took responsibility for turning Shane. Because there was no reason to do it. He completely sent him in the corner. He kind of just ran in the back of him. Some thought it was intentional from what happened earlier in the season at Portland, but it seems like it wasn't completely intentional. It was just a big rookie mistake from Sam Mayer. I don't think SVG is going to do anything about it. I don't think he retaliates against him. I think he's going to be the bigger man and not cause a wreck. But like I said, I think what happened to SVG was completely unnecessary and completely uncalled for, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. As I believe it was Steven Sun from Frontridge who went up to interview Daniel Suarez and was asked about his contract extension with Trackhouse Racing. There's been rumblings and reports that Daniel Suarez is very close to signing a contract extension with Trackhouse Racing. Daniel Suarez then responded to Steven Sun and basically confirmed what Steven had told him, and he basically says that yes, he is very, very close to signing a contract extension with Trackhouse Racing, and he says in the next 2 weeks, we should be knowing the details. Over last weekend in Chicago, Justin Marks revealed that they are expected to announce their lineup in the next 3 to 5 weeks. Obviously, Daniel Suarez has been rumored to getting a contract extension. We've kind of known about this since Atlanta, but I think Daniel Suarez has done a decent job this year, and I do think he's shown at least a little bit of improvement throughout the 2024 season. But let's be real and honest, if he didn't have that win, he wouldn't be in the playoffs. But it's only be out by like 25 points or whatever. But he's done an okay job. He's actually 17th in the points, which is about where he was at last year at this point. And then, of course, he did have a solid chance to make the playoffs. And he wouldn't be in contention to make the playoffs in points. He'd be only 24 points back behind Chase Briscoe if wins really didn't even matter. But I think next year, if we don't know how long the extension is going to be, which if you want my honest prediction, I do think that you're going to see Daniel Suarez have probably a 2 to 3 year extension because they do like him. He brings sponsorship to the table, and Pitbull most likely would not be at the organization right now if Daniel Suarez wasn't driving for it. This means a lot toward the future for Trackhouse, though, because Ross Chastain's locked up under contract for the next 2 years, and that means if Trackhouse is going to have 3 cars, they're going to choose between SVG and Zane Smith. We'll talk about both those drivers here in just a little bit, but I think Daniel Suarez is questionable if he's earned the right opportunity to get another contract extension, but at the same time, I think some will say he has, and I do agree to an extent that he does at least deserve a chance and opportunity to get a contract extension. We'll see what ends up happening, and we'll see what happens in regards to that, but we will know Daniel Suarez' future here in the not-so-distant future and know what Daniel Suarez' contract is going to look like because we should be knowing that here in the coming weeks and the coming months as well. We're probably going to know by the time we get to Indianapolis we're going to probably have some more silly season news coming in regards to that very, very soon. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch versus Corey LaJoie. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono earlier today, there was a caution that took place with about 5 laps to go for Todd Gillen, who had a broken brake rotor, if I'm not mistaken, and ran into the outside wall. We get to the next restart with about 35 to 36 laps to go. And we see a very solid and a really, really strong run from Corey LaJoie to the inside of Kyle Busch. And he just completely tried to send it and get by Kyle. Kyle Busch puts one block on Corey LaJoie. All of a sudden, Corey LaJoie goes up and turns Kyle Busch up the racetrack, spins into the inside grass, and multiple drivers are collected in the wreck, including AJ Allmendinger, Carson Osbar had a very impressive save, Harrison Burton, Ryan Preece, and a couple other drivers were also collected in the incident and wreck. This took Kyle Busch completely out of contention, and he sadly fell out of the race because of the contact from Corey LaJoie. There was radio communication from Corey LaJoie's team and organization where they basically said that Kyle Busch blocked him twice, and Corey would continue to say that throughout the media availabilities after the race concluded. And then basically the pit crew and the radio communication was just completely uncalled for and unacceptable. Kyle Busch then spoke to the media basically saying that he got kamikaze, but when he spoke to NBC, he basically had a no comment situation, basically saying certain things. Certain things like, nah, basically no comment. Corey LaJoie then spoke to the media after the race concluded in regards to the situation, and he really took no accountability. He said that Kyle Busch blocked him twice and basically wrecked him. When we look at the replay of what happened on the track, Corey LaJoie completely just turned Kyle Busch. Whether it was intentional or not, if you get blocked once and you dump somebody, that is just completely uncalled for. Look, I used to like Corey LaJoie, and I still kind of like him. But it seems like every week Corey LaJoie is doing something really stupid. And he's making a lot of bonehead moves and a lot of bonehead decisions. He wrecked Jimmy Johnson in Nashville, which I completely called him out for. And he's just done a lot of things that have pissed off a lot of drivers. And the big problem I have with Corey LaJoie as well is one, the radio communication from his team. That was completely classless and uncalled for. The other thing that frustrated me is the fact that Corey LaJoie will never ever take accountability for an incident in wreck. And it takes him 4 or 5 days to usually take that accountability. The fact that you can clearly see here that Kyle Busch got dumped by Corey LaJoie for the incident, and the fact that he couldn't take accountability for that, I think is just completely unjustified. And the fact that the team had reaction saying he completely deserved it when 5 or 6 cars, which by the way, Corey did not say that Kyle deserved it, but the fact that the crew basically said that Kyle deserved to get turned when basically 5 or 6 cars got taken out, I'd be pissed off about that, especially if I'm Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch did not deserve that in my opinion. I thought that was completely classless and unprofessional. And I think NASCAR needs to take action. I'm not sure if Gisbergen should suspend him because I'm not exactly sure if we should be handing out suspensions for something like that. But at the same token, at the same time, you can't be getting away with that kind of stuff. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble. We penalized Bubba Wallace $50,000 for a little bit of contact. I wonder if NASCAR is going to do anything. I know that Jeff Gluck and them were basically saying, oh, they shouldn't penalize him. But at the same token, same time, I do think that it was uncalled for, a really bad move, a rookie mistake by a driver who's been in the Cup Series for a long time and has 9 top 10 finishes in 256 starts. Corey needs to learn better. He needs to learn to control his emotions on the track and not do stupid stuff like this because he's going to get called out by a lot of people, and a lot of people in the industry are not happy with Corey LaJoie in that situation. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Remember, early in this week, Bubba Wallace was fined $50,000 for contact post-race at the Chicago Street Course. Coming to the checkered flag, or about a little bit after the start of Stage 2, there was some contact between Alex Bowman that completely sent Bubba Wallace around. After the race concluded, Bubba Wallace justifiably runs into Alex Bowman and basically forces Bowman into the outside wall. Now, normally NASCAR has not penalized drivers for this, and they didn't hand Bubba Wallace a points penalty for the situation, but they handed Bubba Wallace a $50,000 fine. Now, a big question a lot of people have been wondering is, will 2311 Racing appeal the fine that took place? Well, they officially confirmed that both 2311 Racing and Bubba Wallace will not appeal the penalty that Bubba Wallace received. Denny Hamlin felt with cameras catching it, it resulted in a penalty. Compared to the other situation with Daniel Suarez and Chase Elliott, where a viral clip ended up happening, that's why they did not receive a penalty there. Alex Bowman spoke on the situation, and he says that Bubba really didn't do anything wrong to him, but it's not my decision. I don't have really any influence on what NASCAR ends up making decisions. Bubba Walston had a very long media personality or something like that take place where he spoke to the media and basically says the penalty was probably the best thing to happen to them. He actually spoke to Kevin Harvick at a karting event that took place this week at a Legends Car event, and basically Kevin Harvick gave him a lot of advice to try to help him out. Bubba says that he also texted Alex Bowman after the race had concluded, I believe on Monday, and they basically talked about the situation that happened. And Bubba said he's not been really the best person on the track, and he's got a lot of things that he really wants to do to clean himself up. Look, Bubba Wallace does have a little bit of a temper. There is no denying that. But I think I've said it already here, and I like that Bubba's kind of having this self-reflecting moment. Coming into this year, he had a lot of confidence. He had cleaned up a lot of the mental stuff that's been going on, and he cleaned a lot of that up and tried to become a better person going into this year. And when you've had a lot of races where things have gone wrong, sometimes that can really hurt you. For Bubba Wallace in this situation, though, I don't agree with the $50,000 fine still, because the problem I have with this situation is Chase Elliott and Daniel Suarez were both not fined. And the fact that Chase Elliott got nothing for, I think is extremely unjustified. I don't think Bubba Wallace should have been handed anything. I'm glad Bubba, he feels like he says he probably is the best thing to happen for him. And Bubba used that today to get a top 10. He had a very solid run today. He got a 7 top 10 of the season. Is on track to have a career year at least on top 10s. It only needs 2 more top 5s to tie his record of top 5s in a season. But Bubba, like I said, should not have received a fine for the contact. I think NASCAR went a little bit overkill here. And if we see contact like this going forward, there should be penalties for other drivers. Because if they don't penalize other drivers for this kind of stuff, I do think that there will be some people that are very frustrated. Because I said this a long time. NASCAR needs to really get it out of their ass, and they need to figure out the inconsistent issues because they've had major inconsistency problems over the course of the last few years, and they really do need to clean it up. So I truly hope they end up cleaning up the stuff right there. They end up fixing some of the issues and problems when it comes to the inconsistency, and we can see NASCAR move on from the situation going forward. And Bowman and Bubba seem like they're on good terms. I know those two have had history, but it seems like they're in good terms. Unlike Eric Almirola and Bubba Wallace, I think they're both going to be on good terms going forward. And I don't think we see any more issues going on between both drivers. But I'm really glad Bubba spoke to the media. He basically apologized also to his assistant Sydney. He also apologized to Zach Serinello. And he said he had apologized to a lot of people for his bad attitude and blowing people off. I think Bubba's learned from his mistakes over the last couple of years. I think he's shown maturity at times. And I think sometimes letting your frustration and personality come out is not a bad thing. Nonetheless, I feel for Bubba in this situation. I don't know how I feel about NASCAR making that call to penalize him. I don't agree with it, but that is just my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about media rights silly season. Now we're going to talk about regular silly season here in just a little bit, but Adam Stern wrote out an article in regards to media rights silly season. While you have NASCAR Cup silly season for driver movement happening, you also have the broadcasting silly season going on because there's expected to be a ton of movement in regards to that silly season. We already know that Dale Jr. is going to be on Warner Bros. Going to be doing TNT and True TV coverage, and also will be on Amazon Prime for a lot of next season. We also know that Jimmy Johnson is going to be covering some races on NBC this year, and we know that Rick Allen will be moving to the CW at least for the remainder of this season. But there was a very interesting article that Adam Stern reported. He says that NASCAR's new media rights partners are casting a wide net to find the talent to be in the booth next year. According to Adam Stern, Marty Smith is the favorite to be the play-by-play announcer for Amazon in 2025. As Steve Letarte is also heavily rumored to potentially joining TNT and Prime in 2025 as well. As Steve Letarte is, of course, part of Dirty Mo Media, and we know that Steve Letarte and Dale Jr. are really good friends, and they worked together for many years on the Pit Crew box. It would make a lot of sense for him to move over there. Let's first talk about Marty Smith potentially being the play-by-play announcer. I don't think Marty Smith has ever been a lead commentator for a broadcasting event. He's done a lot of the long-form content and podcasting. I don't understand this move personally. I think he'd be a really good pit reporter and doing the kind of stuff he does and really helping on that front. Kind of do what Tom Rinaldi's doing or kind of be a pit reporter there. I don't know how I feel about him being a play-by-play announcer. Some people are not cut out to be play-by-play announcers, and I don't think that Marty Smith has really ever been a play-by-play announcer. I want him being part of NASCAR coverage because I think it'd be really cool for him to be part of it, and we need younger people in there. But at the same token, at the same time, Marty Smith, not so sure about it. Steve Letarte going to TNT Prime, no-brainer in my opinion. Steve Letarte is excellent at what he does. He's been really good with NBC. I think he's been one of the better parts of NBC, and he provides a lot of analytical analysis. As for Adam Alexander is rumored to potentially be going at Prime as well, but according to the reports, he's a favorite to lead the CW in 2025. Adam Alexander leading the Xfinity broadcast is also a no-brainer, and I think he'd be really good at it. There's rumors he could cover some IndyCar races next year as well for Fox, so he could be doing coverage on both the CW and Fox next year once again. But Adam Alexander being part of the CW would be a great move. He knows the Xfinity Series field. I think he did a really good job when he was covering Xfinity Series races with Fox. And I certainly do think if you put him in the booth next year with the CW, he'd do a very excellent job. Jay McMurray, according to this list as well, is also rumored to be on the move potentially to a big network. He could go to Prime next year. He could go to a network like NBC, but could also go to the CW. I think him being paired up with Adam Alexander would be a great move. And Shannon Spake, it was reported by a fellow NFL reporter that Shannon Spake is no longer with Fox. She's been let go from Fox with Race Hub going away. I think Amazon and Prime picking her up would be a very excellent move, or going to TNT's. I think Shannon Spake has done an excellent job with Fox over the course of the last couple of years. Rick Allen, unsure what he's doing next year. He's kind of in flux. We know Lee Divvy's going to be covering, of course, the NBC stuff for NASCAR going forward. Jimmy Johnson is expected to be there. Jeff Burton as well, potentially. And we also could see some other big moves. Carl Edwards is interested in coming back to the media landscape and doing some NASCAR broadcasts in the future. And my other big question is what happens at Alan Bestwick, because Alan Bestwick is someone else who could come back to NASCAR. Apparently, from what people have been saying, I think Jarrett mentioned this on his live stream, that apparently there have been offers sent to Alan Bestwick to cover some NASCAR races. If I'm Amazon, I'm bringing Alan Bestwick in. A dreamboat with Steve Letarte, Dale Jr., and Alan Bestwick would be amazing, or find a way to get Wally Downback Jr. to be part of a booth. That'd be excellent as well. It's going to be very interesting to see how media rights kind of play out and how all the pieces kind of come together. But there's a lot of big movement expected to happen and take place over the course of the next few months. And I think it's going to be very exciting to kind of share everything as time progresses and goes on. But there's a lot of big movement that's expected to happen in the NASCAR media rights deal. And we should be knowing about all the major moves that are coming very, very soon. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR's silly season. Now, earlier this week, Bob Poggers put out an article in regards to potential moves in NASCAR's silly season, and he talked about what big moves could end up happening in the future with NASCAR's silly season. He first begins by talking about some of the teams that basically have everything confirmed. Hendrick Motorsports, Chase Elliott, William Byron, Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman are all set for 2025. Kyle Larson has a contract through 2026. Byron has a contract through next year, but he's going to get an extension with Valvoline extending through 2029. Chase Elliott set through 2027, and Alex Bowman is set through 2026. Joe Gibbs Racing, they're completely set for next year. Chase Briscoe is going to take over for Martin Truex Jr. Chris Bell will be in the 20. Denny Hamlin will be in the 11. And we know that Ty Gibbs will be in the 54. There's been talk about maybe a number change at the organization, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Now we move on to talk about Penske. They're also pretty much set, but Austin Cindric is a driver that is not fully signed for next year going into 2025, but with his win at Gateway and making the playoffs, he will be set for next year. Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano are both also signed for the 2025 season. Now we move on to talk about 2311 Racing. 2311 Racing has two rides that at least are currently up and available, but Bubba Wallace, who is not signed for next year at this moment, we know that he is more than likely going to sign an extension with 2311 Racing. Bubba Wallace has been an integral part of 2311 Racing since the beginning of the team's beginning. I think that Bubba Wallace will easily be able to sign a contract extension. I think that's going to get announced in the next couple of weeks. I think it'll be at least a 2 to 3 year extension for Bubba. He's expected to sign a multi-year agreement with 2311. The other big question is that third 2311 Racing seat because Tyler Reddick is set for the future. Right now it's coming down between Riley Herbst and Corey Heim. And many people are starting to believe that Riley Herbst is going to get the third 2311 Racing seat. Rumors are speculating that Troy Herbst, who's Riley Herbst's father, is funding that ride for Riley going into next year. Despite the fact that Corey Heim, I think, earned the right to move up the Cup, and I think he's moving up next year, it sounds like there's a chance that Riley Herbst could end up getting the seat for 2025 with that team. I think Riley would be a good candidate for a part-time seat at 2311, but I think Corey Heim should be full-time. We also know they're going to run a fourth part-time car for Martin Truex Jr. We could see Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, some other people come in there, same with Chandler Smith and other drivers, and I think that Corey Heim, if he isn't full-time, could be part-time. Moving on to another team, Trackhouse Racing. That's another team we don't know everything yet. I already talked about Daniel Suarez. He is going to sign an extension in the coming weeks. Ross Chastain, he signed through at least next year. The big question surrounds Shane Van Gisbergen and Zane Smith. Which one of these drivers is going to get the seat? Everyone is expecting that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to get the third Trackhouse Racing car next year. I think Shane's earned the right to get that third seat. He's won 3 Xfinity Series races this year. He's gotten better on ovals. He should have gotten the top 10 yesterday or a couple days ago at Pocono. I think he's earned the right and opportunity to move up to the Cup Series full-time next year. Zane Smith, he's shown a lot of improvement, and he could have gone back to front row. Word on the street is Zane Smith is talking to Kaulig and is talking to Front Row Motorsports as well. We got to remember SVG also brings sponsorship in as well. He brings sponsorship from Wendy's, WeatherTech, and also sponsorship from Red Bull as well. So he's got this funding and sponsorship. And he wouldn't be over here in America racing full-time in Xfinity if he wasn't planning to move up the Cup. He's got a lot of Cup starts scheduled for later in the year and will probably have more starts. He had a Daytona not too long ago. I think SVG will be adding more starts here in the future. But I think Shane Van Gisbergen will be moving up to Cup next season. Moving on and talk about Richard Childress Racing. This team's been rumored to have 3 cars potentially next year. Kyle Busch will be returning to RCR in 2025. He confirmed that very recently back at Iowa Speedway. There was talk maybe someone could buy out his contract, but Kyle Busch will stick around. And Austin Dillon also confirmed, despite rumors of him leaving, he will be sticking around with RCR for at least the next 2 years. There was talk about a third ride for Noah Gragson at one point, but Noah Gragson's going to front row, and the only other driver that could go there is Austin Dillon, the third seat, but we are not expecting RCR to expand to 3 full-time cars. Now let's move on to Front Row Motorsports. Front Row currently has 1 ride left available. Todd Gillen to sign for next year and Noah Gragson to sign for next year with Front Row. The big question revolves around the third seat. I already mentioned Zane Smith. He's one of the 3 drivers that's in the running for the front row car for next year. The other 2 are Christian Eckes and Sam Mayer. Sam Mayer, from a lot of reports, have suggested that he is currently the lead candidate to take over the third seat. Sam Mayer, in my opinion, maybe needs another year in Xfinity, but if he's bringing the sponsorship and funding, it would make a lot of sense to move up, even though I don't entirely agree, and I don't feel like he's ready to make the jump up in 2025. Christian Eckes has been tearing it up in the Truck Series. I think he's more of a leading candidate than Sam Mayer personally. I think he should be one of the lead candidates. And if I was front row getting Zane Smith, that would be a no-brainer. But I think Sam Mayer might end up winning out. Christian Eckes, though, could go to Kaulig Racing. Kaulig Racing is expected to have 2 entries next year. Rumors are that Zane Smith could also go to this team next year. And AJ Allmendinger could potentially be full-time with this team in 2025. If Sam Mayer does move up to the Cup Series to drive for front row, right now it sounds like Connor Zilisch is going to take his seat. Junior Motorsports has been a team in recent years that has been looking to potentially move up to Cup next year, but that team has confirmed that they're not planning to buy a charter for next year, and I do think Connor Zilisch is going to take the 1 car in 2025. Connor, of course, a racing prodigy, has been tearing it up, of course, in the lower series, has been great in Trans Am, among other things. I think you will see Connor Zilisch move up full-time, and of course, he's got wins in Rolex in Sebring. Connor Zilisch, a racing prodigy, will be with Junior Motorsports most likely next year. Carson Ospar, according to reports, is also expected to sign an extension with Spire. He's not officially signed for next year at this time, but Spire has confirmed in recent months that they're expected to get a contract extension done with him next year. I do expect Carson Ospar to move up to Spire Motorsports and stay with Spire in 2025. Finally, Rick Ware Racing. This is a team we don't really know. Justin Haley is signed through next year currently at this moment, and we do think, despite the fact he was rumored at one point to go to the Wood Brothers, he's expected to stick around with that team next year. And we also do know that Ryan Preece could go here, and same with Harrison Burton, maybe Hailie Deegan as well. But we do know that they're also in the running to go to Xfinity, but we could see Ryan Preece go here full-time next year. Going to be very interesting to see how silly season plays out over the course of the next couple weeks. I think a majority of the remaining rides that are not officially signed are going to get confirmed in the next 2 weeks, and I think you're going to see a lot of Xfinity Series silly season moves that are going to end up taking place. So we'll see what ends up happening in regards to silly season and what major moves end up taking place for the 2025 season in the silly season market. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, David Lane, who's a fellow motorsports YouTuber, reported that Hailie Deegan was officially spotted at Iowa Speedway. And according to what Breakcard, a fellow YouTuber, of course, works at the Daily Downforce, he reports that Hailie Deegan apparently has had a seat fitting with Andretti Autosport in Indy NXT. There's been rumor speculation going on as of late that Hailie Deegan could potentially be on the move to IndyCar as early as this year. Hailie Deegan, of course, it was announced early last week that she would not be returning to AM Racing for the remainder of the 2024 season. Now, Hailie Deegan was at Pocono earlier today for some Iowa or Idaho food sing, if I'm not mistaken. So Hailie Deegan is not completely gone from NASCAR. And I do expect that Hailie Deegan is going to make a comeback to NASCAR in the near future. But what Hailie Deegan, I think, is doing here is she's looking for her next opportunity. Over the last couple weeks, we've seen Josh Berry and Joe Logano take over that 15 car. And Josh Berry had some tire issues, but he qualified solidly, but unfortunately finished 27th in that 15 car. Joe Logano, of course, finished in 8th position. I think we all know that AM Racing as an organization, they have a lot of work to do, and they've got a lot of problems. Hailie Deegan was definitely part of the problem for sure, but I do think that AM Racing itself, with them being a sophomore team, having a rookie in their car, I think that unfortunately put her in a bad position. But with Hailie Deegan on the move to potentially Andretti in Indy NXT, this has a big implication for another big reason. Hailie Deegan, from what I understand, is under contract with Ford through 2026. So this would put maybe an end to that Ford contract that she has, which could also mean she'd go to a lot of different teams if she was to return to NASCAR. Now, this is not the first time Hailie Deegan has been spotted at a IndyCar event. Back in 2019, she actually did some test laps, I believe, in a Team Penske car with Simon Pagenaud watching her when Simon Pagenaud was still at Team Penske back in 2019. And obviously, Hailie Deegan's been doing some open wheel racing as of late, as well as she's been doing some sprint car racing, I believe, at Millbridge. Hailie Deegan going to IndyCar would be a very interesting move. Now, she would not be going completely fully IndyCar racing. She'd be probably racing at Indy NXT. Now, maybe if she runs the Indy NXT, we could see her succeed. Let's be real and honest. Her time in NASCAR, which, like I said, I don't think is going to be done for, by the way, but her time in NASCAR really was not going well. She struggled in the Truck Series, only got like 4 or 5 top 10s altogether, and her best points finish, I believe, is 19th. And then this year with AM Racing, she was last in the standings and was completely struggling. And we know that Michael Andretti really likes Hailie Deegan. Hailie Deegan, outside of NASCAR, I think she's done a good job in other forms of motorsport. She was really good in that IMSA race, that Michelin Pilot Challenge race that she ran in the 4 GT cars, and she led laps in that event and was competing up front on a road course nonetheless, and she was outright leading. And I go back to those SRX races that she ran a couple years ago, and she actually was very impressive, got a couple podiums, and she showed a lot of improvement, which we all thought was going to transition with the on-track activity. But it never really transitioned her in NASCAR having a ton of success. Now, you all have to remember, Hailie Deegan is still very, very young. She is only 22 years old. She'll turn 23 in the next couple of days. I believe on July 17th, if I'm not mistaken, she will turn 23 years old. So Hailie Deegan is still a relatively young race car driver. So she easily, if she wanted to, she could come back to NASCAR and she could go and race there. Now, do I think Hailie Deegan, like I said, is out of NASCAR completely? No, absolutely not. I think she will make a comeback to NASCAR in 2025. I think the reason that she was spotted doing Indy NXT races or potentially doing them is because she wants to get some more seat time and race in other series. IndyCar is very interesting. It's different than NASCAR, and they race a little differently. And most of the rest of the Indy NXT schedule is basically ovals. I don't expect her to go up and beat drivers like Jacob Abel and Louis Foster or anybody, but if she can race in the top 10, that would be certainly impressive. Now, does this mean that Jamie Chadwick gets replaced potentially? Maybe, but I don't see Jamie Chadwick getting replaced by her because Jamie Chadwick's already won a race this year. She got her first win at Road America not too long ago, and I certainly think Jamie Chadwick is a better driver in this form than Hailie Deegan. I want to see Hailie Deegan succeed in motorsports. She is great for motorsports. I know some will disagree and say she is not a talented race car driver, but I do disagree. But what does this mean, like I said, for NASCAR future? Like I said, I do think Hailie Deegan is going to come back to NASCAR next year. I think you got to look at teams like Haas Factory Team looking at it for next season. Haas Factory Team has 2 rides currently available in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for next year, and despite the fact that Ryan Preece, Harrison Burton are currently favorites to take over those seats, we could see her get one of those rides with the sponsorship, especially if Harrison Burton and Ryan Preece goes to like Ricker Racing. I could see her leaving Ford altogether and maybe running part-time with Joe Gibbs Racing with a really top-tier team. She wants to race competitively, and AIM Racing wasn't giving her those opportunities. If she stays with Ford, I think the best opportunity is to go with RSS Racing or AM, or maybe go back down to Trucks or ARCA. I could certainly see that as a possibility. I want to see Hailie Deegan back in the sport. I really hope she does come back to NASCAR, but if she does leave NASCAR altogether and goes to IndyCar, I personally don't blame her. I think she does have talent. She's shown in other forms of racing, and I think that she deserves to be racing and hope she can get the chance and opportunity, like I said, to come back to NASCAR in the future. If she does go to IndyCar, I wish her the best of luck and success. We could see Hailie Deegan potentially move over to the open wheel world, maybe as early as this season. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let's get below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about all the potential silly season moves we're going to see in the future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Hailie Deegan comes back to NASCAR or stays in the IndyCar world? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There won't be any more videos likely dropping today unless some major news breaks. Then on tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have the intro list for the Brickyard 400, and we're also likely going to have the Truck Series race fix for IRP as well. Then on Wednesday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple days. And like I said, if any major news breaks throughout the week, we'll discuss here live on the channel as we, of course, head to the Brickyard 400. And then the week after that, I've got the top 100 greatest NASCAR Cup Series drivers dropping the 2024 edition. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.